I'm Josh Liston from On the Bubble podcast, an oral history of television fandom, part of the Gonna Geek network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
We are joined once again for the sixth time.
Is it really 6 times?
This is the sixth time, yes. You have been on the show.
Yay.
The always hilarious Erica Schultz. Erica, thank you for joining us and making sure that you're staying hydrated as well.
I don't know if anybody has ever referred to me as hilarious. They've referred to me as chaotic or hysterical, but never hilarious.
No, see, I think you are hilarious because there is a wryness to your wit and humor that I appreciate, and I just feel compelled to let you know that every time you come on, it's always a joy. I'm always cracking up when I listen or I re-listen to older interviews, especially now at this point. Like I said, this being the sixth time that we've had you on. So for those folks that haven't yet experienced a Capes interview with Erica, go back and listen to all the prior episodes. We talked about 12 Devils Dancing. We talked about
Moon Knight.
We talked about Forgotten Home. Yeah, I interviewed you at New York Comic Con, which I'm also technically counting as one of the times.
That works.
That factors in. It wasn't exclusively Erica Schultz, but you were part and parcel of the creator interviews. But we get you solo here. We're going to lead up to Rat City, the new book that you've got coming out. But since it has been a hot minute since the last time you were on. I think you were on in like November of 22. It was fall of 22, and you had just announced that you were going to be doing X-23 Deadly Regenesis and Hallows Eve. And since then, you've also done What If Dark Moon Knight and Daredevil Gang War. Then, just a mild spoiler for the ending. I know that you've also got coming up Blood Hunters and Darth Maul Black, White, and Red. So my first question to you is, whose ass do I have to alternately kick or kiss to get you a Marvel ongoing? Because you're doing all these fantastic minis and these tie-ins and these one-shots and stuff like that. And I'm like, I need a monthly dose. So like, what would it take? Who do I have to talk to over at Marvel to get you an ongoing?
Well, I will say this. I looked at my calendar earlier today, and I will have a Marvel book on the shelf every single month this year. So you will get your monthly dose of Erica every single month this year. In terms of an ongoing, I don't know. It's funny. It's the be careful what you wish for. I wish for all these different series, I wish to write all these different characters, and then I get to write all these different characters, and I'm like, I'm losing my mind.
I got the feeling, not to step on your toes, but I got the feeling it's partly because when you write a character, I mean, you write a character, you write a person, and that's got to take a lot.
It does. I joke around that everybody thinks, oh, well, you just write comic books, and it's, that's your job is fun and everything like that. And yes, my job is fun. My research is reading comics, and that's a lot of fun. But when you think about it in, I don't know if you want to call it an academic way or whatever, I mean, I have to look at a history that has already been established. Like Doc, you have to look at a patient history. You get a brand new patient that comes through your doors. You have to look at patient history, and you have to see what's worked and what hasn't worked, and what can I do that can help treat this patient for either something that is recurring or something that is brand new. And keep in mind medication interactions, keep in mind previous stays in this, that, and the next thing. Keep in mind family history and everything else. So I basically have to do that with characters, but I have to find something new and interesting and something that keeps to the core of who that character is, but then also adds to it, adds to their backstory, adds to their mythology, adds to their history as a character, that in 10, 20, 30 years, someone might be going back and reading my work and saying, okay, so this is like for X23. So this is what Tom Taylor wrote. This is what Erica Schultz wrote. This is what Chris Yost wrote. What else are we going to do? And Marika, I know I'm pronouncing their name incorrectly, and I apologize, but Marika, I believe Tanaka, they did X23 as well. So, I mean, is somebody, I need to create something that is interesting, that is different from what everybody else has done, but doesn't stand out so much that people will turn around and be like, that can't be canon. So, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, when we were talking to Philip Kennedy Johnson not that long ago, he said, he has to work within the framework of the existing characters, but it also has to be a story that he wants to tell.
Yes.
And that matters to him and that inspires him to want to write it. And so I imagine it's very similar for you, that when you tell these stories, it's not just, okay, I'm just going to tell this particular story about this character and, fill 4 or 5 issues of whatever. It has to mean something. And that meaning obviously comes through in every, at least to me, it comes through in everything that you write for all the characters that you write. So before we get into X23 then, so, speaking of all the stuff you've done for Marvel, what is a dream character then that you would love to write an ongoing for, and who would you want doing the artwork for you? It's $1 million question, I know, but
it is $1 million question. Okay, so I pitched, and it was kind of an off the hand pitch, so I don't know if they actually took it seriously, but I pitched a while ago. When I say a while ago, I mean multiple years ago. I pitched a Daughters of the Dragons in space, because you've got Colleen and Misty that are 2 street level Earth-based characters. Put them in doing bail bondswoman work in space for sword or whatever the saber, whatever the shield version, cosmic shield version is. And then every issue, I mean, you have your broad story arc of the big bad that they need to get to by the end of the story arc, but every single issue you could do all of these fun cameos by all of Marvel's great cosmic characters. You've got Beta Ray Bill, you've got any number of the Guardians of Galaxy, you've got so many different people that you can play with. You've got Galactus, you've got the Inhumans on Attilan, you've got Uatu. Well, no, technically Uatu's dead because of Original Sin. But the point is that you have so much space to play with. You could get into Eternals. You could get into whether it's the Eternals or the Celestials or whatever. You could get into all the Marvel cosmic stuff. And at the same time, it would be different and interesting because these are 2 characters that are so street level, earthbound. I mean, they don't really even have powers. I mean, obviously Misty has her bionic arm. And Colleen, she doesn't have the iron fist, but she has, like where she can summon her chi and such. But they don't really have powers. Like they're not flying. Laser beams don't shoot out of their eyes, that kind of thing. So I think that you can do so much with that. You could have moments of comedy, like fish out of water comedy. Like every episode is, and I say episode, obviously, because I was just on a podcast talking about TV. So I don't mean it. I don't want fans to be like, oh God, she's already trying to pivot to TV. No, that's not the case. But I think that like every issue you can show the growth of these characters as well as still, I thought I've seen everything. I saw Galactus have a cold and like sneeze and blow his nose and basically take out practically an entire, planet. And now you're showing me something brand new and something different. What the hell? You can send them to Sakaar. You can send them all. You can have Scar and all these other characters that come in. And if you want to give them, an Earthling character, you turn around and you have Captain Marvel come in. Or when Rhodey was in space, like all kinds of stuff. There's so much there to mine. And you know what's going to happen? Someone's going to listen to this podcast and be like, that's a really great idea. Let's give that series to fill in the blank writer who is not Eric Schultz. In terms of artists, who would I want to work with? There are some phenomenal artists that I have been pushing to work with. and some brand new artists that I just got the chance to work with. Giada Belviso is a lovely Italian artist, lovely young woman who worked on the Women of Marvel 9-page Black Widow story with me. Phenomenal. Loved working with her. She was really terrific. Skylar Patridge, another fantastic artist. They did some stuff for, what was it? It was one of the Marvel anthology series. Great work. They're doing stuff for DC. Liana Kangas. I adore Liana. Liana did a phenomenal piece, a Daredevil Elektra piece for me that I've been, putting up everywhere on social media. I'd love to work with Liana on something. I would love to work with my partner in Bylines and Blood, Anike. I would love to work with Anike. I would love to work with Marika Cresta. She and I worked together on Forgotten Home. It would be wonderful to work with her. She also did Dr. Aphra, and she did Captain Carter. So she's worked plenty for Marvel, and she's done the space stuff with Dr. Aphra. I would love to work with Maria Laura Sanapo, who she and I worked together on Charmed many, many years ago at Dynamite. She's doing tons of great stuff at DC. I would love to work with her in Marvel. Adriana Mello, another fantastic artist, worked on Ms. Marvel, done some X-Men work, did a lot of stuff at DC. I'd love to work with Adriana. I mean,
I can see you're really struggling to think of names here. It's just, it's tough. I get it. Yeah.
There are a lot
such
of
exacting standards and
there are a lot of fantastic artists that are either just starting out or working on stuff that they really want to get their foot in the door. And I am consistently sending emails to editors saying, I want to work with this artist. I want to work with that artist. And sometimes they're receptive to it. And other times, and I get it. Editors have the people that they want to work with. They have the people that they know will deliver. And I understand that. And I understand that the monthly pace of comics is difficult. And I understand that if you're brand new, you might freeze. You might freeze up and then the schedule's blown. I understand all of that and I respect that. At the same time, I kind of want to say, look, these are people that I want to work with. Jan Bazadul is another fantastic artist. We did a short that's going to come out, a short together 5-page story that's going to come out in Daredevil #8. So I mean, there's a lot of people. Helson Sampson's another one. Oh God, there's a lot of people I'd like to work with. I just have to write more comics.
Well, then stop talking to us and get writing. Like, what the hell are you doing?
I already.
Why are you wasting your time with us?
Today has already been a marathon. I had 2 very long Zoom calls earlier today. I had to revise a bunch of outlines. And I know I make it sound like this is such a chore, and I get that. But one thing that I really would like people to understand, and Doc, you could probably speak to this, is that when you are expending mental energy, it does give you physical exhaustion.
Amen. Woo.
I don't know what you're talking about. I sit on my ass all day and, I feel great because I'm just thinking, but my body's not doing anything. It's wonderful. It's so recharging to the battery. Ha, ha, ha.
It's really, I mean, and I get it. Like, I'm not chasing after a toddler. I'm not, working in a hospital. I'm not trying to cure cancer. I understand that. And believe me, I know that the job that I do is so first world and so privileged to do it. And I acknowledge that 100%. At the same time, if I just say I'm tired and someone's response is, you write comics, like how tired can you really be? Well, try writing comics and then you tell me.
Yeah, I will never, ever say that to anybody in any level of the creative space, because this podcast involves some creativity on our end. And my goodness, the times we've said, hey, we're taking a break and everything. And sometimes people will say like, oh, well, why would you need a break from that? Aren't you a doctor? Isn't this relaxing? I said, well, no, I enjoy it. But wow. And that's for things where we do very short things that we write in relatively short order. And you have in previous podcast episodes with us gone over your process as to how you develop stories and how you develop characters. So I can't imagine the idea, not just taking what you do on a regular basis and then having to explain that to an editor, having to make sure that vision gets put in a proper format, all that stuff. Like To be honest, I have difficulty processing that, like just even thinking about that. So the fact that you are willing to put in that energy and that effort, I mean, I commend you for that.
Yeah,
I appreciate
same
that.
here.
I didn't just come on here to be like, tell me how wonderful I am, but thank you for telling me how wonderful I am.
Oh, well, that's one of the reasons why this is the 6th appearance on the show, because we do think you're wonderful, and we do love having you. So we'll start with X-23. We'll just kind of like hit some of the stuff that you've done, and just a couple questions about each. So X-23, this is a period in which Laura has left Utopia. So this is kind of a bit of a flashback or an earlier period in Laura's life. Why go back to this particular period when she's left Utopia? Why was this time the time and the setting for the story that you wanted to tell?
The really simple answer is that's what my editor pitched me. This actually takes place. So in the X-23 run where she ends up meeting up with Gambit in issue number 5, I think it's started in 2012. This miniseries takes place between that issue number 4 and that issue number 5. And the editor spoke and said, we want to sort of flesh out Laura a little bit more, and we want to do something that can fit within the timeline as well. Because at the time when I was working on this, Laura had just come out of that bubble, like interdimensional thing, and there was Old Woman Laura, aka Talon, and then Wolverine Laura, and Wolverine Laura was reborn. So there was a lot of, and it was the Krakoan era, and I admittedly had not been keeping up with it. So I mean, it would have been, you want to talk about an exhausting research. I mean, it would have taken me a month just to research everything, to try and keep up with everything. So I said, look, I'm very familiar with that run, that earlier run. I'm more than happy to work within that. So I kind of looked at it as kind of like the 70s Hulk show, where Laura comes into town, messes around with stuff, fixes a problem, and then goes on. And they were like, no, we like that. But what if the problem comes to Laura? Laura's not going to the problem comes to Laura. And so we have Laura sort of, going on walkabout, and her past, which at this point, in the utopian point in her story, in her canon timeline, she's about 17. And she's freaking out all of the teens on Utopia, because she never had a childhood. She never had anything like that. She didn't have a mutant awakening like a lot of them did. She always was what she was from the beginning. And she was turned an assassin at the age of 7. So in that storyline is when basically Logan says, I think you need to go out and find yourself. And so this falls within that. So I have her in Minneapolis. I have her staying at one of Logan's many safe houses. I mean, you think about it, Logan's been alive for 150 years. He's got places everywhere. So we have her in one of the safe houses. And while she's sort of walking around town, she starts seeing little glimpses of other people living their lives, and sort of questions, is that something I would ever want? Is that something I would ever be a part of? Is that something I would ever feel like I needed? And it really examines who she is and who she thinks she is and who she thinks that she can be. And what I try and do with a lot of the stories that I write, and very specifically this one, is I try to give a mantra to the characters. And that mantra is like the through line that goes throughout the entire thing. And in this one, Laura's mantra is, I must do what others cannot. So we see Laura jump into action where this building is on fire. And it's this huge high-rise building, and it's like 4-alarm fire. And she sees that the firemen are struggling. She sees that they're struggling to get into the building because it is so hot that the firemen are saying, like, we can't get in because we won't be able to be efficient if we go in there. And she knows that she can handle it. And what does she do? She goes in. There's a page where she's now gone in the building multiple times to pull people out. And as she's coming out of the building the last time, her skin is literally sloughing off of her body. her clothes are half torn off, and she's carrying on her shoulders. She's carrying a full-grown man on her shoulders, and she's walking out, and the only thing that she can say is, "He needs medical assistance because I must do what others cannot," and that is the through line that goes through. And then she gets tagged by someone who she affected inadvertently in her past as an assassin. And she gets tagged by that person, and she is brought back into the fold of the facility with Kimura. And if you know anything about Laura's history, then you know that Kimura was one of the people who trained her when she was a young person.
Yeah. I just reread that run today to refresh myself. I read it. I have the floppies in my drawer, but I was like, let me refresh myself. So I went on Marvel Unlimited, and so all that stuff that you're talking about, I was like, yep. She went in, she found the one person, pulled them out, and then they were like, oh, there's somebody else that's stuck in there, and they can't breathe and this and that. And she's like, all right, well, I guess I got to go back in. And she does, and she comes out, yes, with that, fantastic panel, and it's her healing factor is kicking in and stuff like that, but she's still got muscle and sinew and bone and stuff exposed as it's healing because she's being eaten by the flames. And she's like, yeah. And then the reporter comes in and is like, oh my God, that was so brave. And she's like, get this thing out of my face. No, but please tell us your story. This is absolutely incredible. Turn it off right now. Because that's who Laura is. She's like, I don't want the attention. I'm fighting against what I was bred to do. It's that constant internal struggle. And that's one of the things that makes Laura, such a fantastic character, that whole evolution of who she was when she was young versus who she is now. Speaking of characters that are not the same as they were when they were younger, Haymaker, a transmasc, non-binary MMA fighter. How did that come about? I thought that was a wonderful combination of different facets of a person to put together, and, to have them be the primary adversary, antagonist in the series. What was the process there?
I mean, everybody says representation matters, and it is absolutely true. Instead of sort of beating your chest about that, just put it in a comic and don't make it a big deal. And I think that's one of the things that I try and do, is I just put it there and treat it like it's supposed to be there, because it is supposed to be there. Everybody will argue about somebody's power set. They're arguing about like stupid things like, oh, does Scott get his abilities from solar energy, or are his optic glass concussive versus, laser fiery or whatever. And they'll argue about,
they're not heat beams.
Yeah, they're not heat beams. And they'll argue about stupid stuff like that. Then they'll turn around and say, well, in this world, there shouldn't be fill in the blank of whatever it is, whether it's disabled people, trans people.
Anything that's not a straight white male.
Anything that's not a straight white male. And my whole thing is, so you can reconcile actual physical beams coming out of somebody's eyeballs, and you can reconcile the Macron crystal, and you can reconcile ruby quartz, and telepaths that put a helmet on and can reach anybody on the planet, or even on other planets, let's be honest, because Xavier could talk to Lahandra using Cerebro. You can reconcile all of that, but somebody who's trans, somebody who's gay, somebody who's anything except a straight white dude, like that's a hill that you're going to die on. No, that is trash. So I just treat these characters like they should always be here. So Kimura, who's fostering Jordan, aka Haymaker, Kimura doesn't stutter when she refers to Jordan as they. We see Jordan shirtless. We see that there are top surgery scars. Nobody says anything about it, because that's just the way it is. And if you just treat these things as the way they are, because that's real life. You want to treat comics as real life. You want to say that, the X-Men are real life. Well, show them real life. These are real life. These are real life people. Non-binary people exist. Trans people exist. And it's not one or the other, or if you're a trans person, you have to be like this, or you're trans. No, I'm going to write a transmasc character who happens to be an MMA fighter. And we had Jan Basdua, who is a trans woman artist, actually designed Haymaker and that whole look with the hood and the gauntlets and everything. And Jan designed that character. So
yeah. It's absolutely fantastic. And like I said, because it was one of those things, honestly, I didn't I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't pick up on it the first time I read it. And then when I was going back and yeah, exactly. That is kind of the point, that it's not the type of thing that like sticks out. And then when I was going back and looking up stuff, and I was actually clued in on it on the Marvel.fandom site, because I was looking at the listing for the Deadly Regenesis and stuff. And I was like, okay, Haymaker. And then let me look up the stuff on the character. And it was like, oh, it said somewhere in there that it's not really, referenced within the series, but it's transmasc, non-binary. They go by they, them pronouns, and you can see the scars. And I was like, wait a minute, really? And I went back and I was rereading issue 1, and I was like, oh yeah. But that's the beauty of it again, is it's subtle, but it's there because that's how real life is. It's not a character. It's not a character going around, I'm trans and I'm here and yada, because that to what you were kind of saying earlier is like the virtue signaling stuff.
And that's what pisses people off. It's kind of like, sneaking in veggies into the food to make your kids eat their veggies. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather expose a reader who would never knowingly and purposefully pick up a book with a trans character in it. I would rather expose a reader that way and then be like, oh, that was interesting, or that was different.
Yeah.
Or maybe they get angry at it. Either way. I mean, like,
yeah.
The only time that Jordan actually makes it a point to say these are my pronouns is the last page or the last 2 pages of the entire series, because when Jordan is in that recovery group, the person leading the group says, this is my name, these are my pronouns, who would like to go first? And that's the only time that Jordan says, my name is Jordan, they, them pronouns. Like, that's the only time is explicitly stated.
Yeah. And what I'm about to say may piss some people off, and that's okay, because it's something that I think a lot of people need to hear, or a reminder. If you are angry about the existence of another person, I'm not saying that they did something wrong or they did something damaging. If it's simply their existence that is angering you, recognize that is an indication you have to work on something for yourself. So take that as an opportunity. It's that simple. It really is. You could apply that to anything, any topic. If the existence of a person causes that, then that's something that you internally have to work on, period.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that any type of I refuse to use the word content, because what we do is too much to be reduced to content. But any type of books, stories, entertainment, whatever, I think putting characters that reflect the real world, no matter how fantastical the story is, I think that's important. I think it's absolutely important to do that. And I mean, and it's not the first time. I mean, in Forgotten Home, we have a polyamorous pansexual character of Trodaire. Mm-hmm. And we have a character who's non-binary. And we just treat it like that's what it is. And it's the only time that there's a big deal made about it was because Trodaire catches someone in a lie when they were in a relationship. And it's more of a, you cheated on me versus this is who I am. And I think it needs to be shown that this is normal. And because I think that's the only way that people will finally be like, oh, yeah, these people do exist. And these people are perfectly normal and perfectly fine. And why did I have an issue? Like you said, Doc, if you have an issue with somebody just existing, then you're the one with the issue. You're the one with the problem.
Yep. So moving on to Hallows Eve. This was a bit of a new evolution for Janine Godbe / Elizabeth Tyne / Mary Bailey / Sarah Porter. She's gone by a couple of different names. So the powered masks, which I really liked that aspect of the story, was all the different masks that give her the different powers. Did you come up with the masks first and then decide their impact on the story? Or was it, what's the story, and then like what would be a good power for her to use at this moment?
Well, it was a little bit of both. I mean, the first nut that we had to crack was, is Janine magical or are the masks magical? Because if Janine is magical, then any mask will work with Janine. And I had a scene that we cut where she was in like a spirit Halloween with like a whole armload of masks. But it's the masks that are magical. And so that became, so anyone can take these masks. and anyone can use these masks, and the chaos that that brings. So that was the first thing the first hurdle that we really needed to get through. And then once we figured that out, it was a matter of, okay, what masks are going to do the most chaos, and what masks are going to make her sort of rethink what her goal is. Because Janine, now the reason why her name is Elizabeth Tyne legally, but the reason why she goes by Janine is because that's the name that she was using when she first met Ben Reilly, and Ben is her one and only ride or die true love. So she will always go by Janine now. And so when we open up with the Hallows Eve miniseries, Ben, it comes off of Dark Web, and Ben is imprisoned in the Limbo Embassy. Limbo is now seen as a member of the UN, and they have their own embassy in New York. And Goblin Queen Madeline Pryor is the head of the embassy. And so Janine has a plan, and her plan is that she is going to break Ben out of jail. But the only way that she can do that is if she can make sure that they can stay on the run. So she's robbing some banks and just trying to get enough money so they don't have to keep looking over their shoulder. Because Janine's main core is, I want to be safe and I want Ben to be safe. And if that means that we go to a deserted island where it's just the two of us, great. Or we go to, that old 80s trope of going and hiding in Acapulco or Mexico City, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want anybody to bother me. But if I have to walk through you to make sure that Ben's okay, I'll do it. And so when we first meet Janine, she is using these masks to rob a bank, and she is challenged by a security guard. And she grabs the werewolf mask, and she attacks the security guard. And she even says, I'm not a monster. I'm not going to kill him. I'm not a monster. I'm not a killer. But he's in my way, so I'm going to go through him. And so she's got her bag full of money. And what she doesn't realize is that when she puts on that werewolf mask, she becomes an actual werewolf, mm-hmm. which means that her scratching Simon turns him into a werewolf. And her whole deal is this idea of, well, the world's dealt me a crappy deck. And, the deck's stacked against me. And the first 5 issues, I gave a title to every single one. And it had something to do with poker and either cheating at poker or, whatever. And I think issues 1 and 2 had those titles, and then they dropped them in the credits. And I was like, I worked so hard on that.
Oh.
But basically, she then realizes that she has now stacked the deck against someone else. So who she thought she was being light on this innocent bystander, she was not. She ends up destroying somebody's life. And so she doesn't want to be in debt to anybody, and she doesn't want to have that guilt on her. So she tries to make it right. And that's the journey of this miniseries, is her trying to make it right after this huge mistake that she's made.
Yeah, it's a really cool series. I like stories where, someone they're just trying to do their thing, but they can't escape either their past or something that they did or somebody that they wronged. Something from their past is coming back to bite them in the ass. And they're like, I don't want to deal with this. Don't make me stop and turn around. Don't make me pay attention to you.
Don't make me turn this car around.
Don't make me pay attention to you. I'm trying to live my life forward.
Yeah.
It's that, that niggling little voice in the back of their head, or it's that thing that's chasing them from behind and saying, remember me. Okay. You asked for it. I love those stories. And that's kind of X-23 was a lot of that, the past coming back to bite Laura. And similarly with Hallows Eve. Another story that you worked on, which also involves something from the past coming back in a certain way, was the What If Dark Moon Knight.
Yes.
So now I know you spoke to my buddy Ray over on Into the Night about this one. And so, I'll certainly tell folks to go and check that episode out for like the full breakdown. But Moon Knight versus Bushman happened so many times over the course of the various older comics. Why did you select this particular jumping off point as the one to be like, this is where I'm going to make the story turn?
Because Sal Voluto drew Marlene in a bikini holding an AK-47.
Yeah.
If you go, okay, so this is the Sal Voluto Chuck Dixon run of Mark Spector Moon Knight. And as everybody knows, I've read every iteration of Moon Knight. So I've read Defenders, West Coast Avengers, the whole thing. I've gotten previews of Jed McKay's, the Giant Moon Knight, I've Butcher's Moon, all the whole thing. And one of my favorite runs is the Chuck Dixon Sal Voluto run, which takes you all the way up to just before Stained Glass Scarlet, which was, I believe, J.M.D. Mateus wrote.
Yes, it was.
Stained Glass Scarlet, yes.
J.M.D. Mateus and Ron Garney. That's my favorite Moon Knight story of all time. I have original artwork signed by Ron Garney I have that splash page of Scarlet in the boat it's the end of, I think it's the last page of like the third story.
Issue 3 or part 3 rather. Yeah.
Yeah. Part 3 of the arc where she's like, then let the world burn. I found it at a con and it was like $250. And I called up my wife and I was like, I have to buy this. I know it's like $250, but I was like, I need to have this. And I got it. And
Anthony,
I had it signed by Ron Garney. I still have to have it framed, but yes, that story.
That's cheap. $250 for that page. I would have just bought it and been like, look, honey, this is the way, this is life. No, I'm just kidding. So I know Chuck Dixon is very problematic and I absolutely acknowledge that. I will say that my love for the storyline is mostly Sal Voluto's art, but I will say that I do enjoy the way Chuck Dixon writes Marlene, because in previous iterations of Moon Knight, especially when Mark was dealing with the DID, Marlene was very passive. She was very much the damsel in distress. First of all, she was in love with Stephen Grant. So this is one of the first times that we see her in love with Mark Spector. Now, yes, I know the whole thing with him in the desert with her and her knowing that he was Mark Spector, but after that origin story, she's with Stephen Grant at the mansion. And that's the whole thing. So Marlene she is a PI. She works with Mark. She doesn't work for Mark. She's not Mark's assistant. She's none of that. She's a PI. She is very formidable on her own. And in issue number 1, Bushman, she's driving Mark's car, and Bushman thinks that it's Mark, and so he ambushes her on the LIE, on the Long Island Expressway, and takes her hostage. Now, she is not a shrinking violet hostage. She knows that there's a bunch of guys with guns, but she will mouth off to Bushman left, right, and center. And in issue number 3, when they're in Burundi, which is Bushman's country, and they're at the presidential palace, Mark and Bushman are fighting, and she fights her way out, and she is literally in a bikini, like just barefoot bikini holding an AK, and she's like, bad ass. I begged the editor. I begged him, because I put all of this reference, and I had a conversation with Sal Voluto. I met Sal Voluto last year at Dragon Con, and I gave him a copy of the book, and I totally gushed about how much of a huge fan that I was. And actually, he did a quick Moon Knight sketch for me. So I have a Sal Voluto Moon Knight sketch, a quick pencil sketch that he did for me. And he was saying, he said to me, what is it about our run that you liked? And I was like, oh, you're fishing for compliments here kind of thing. But I was like, you drew Marlene like she was a character, like she was a person, like she mattered. She was not just somebody that Mark would come and save. She was somebody that cared about Mark and that was cared about. And so I wanted to do something with that. And the easiest way to go is, well, Mark loses. Mark loses the fight. I will say this, though. I fought with the editor to have Edgar Salazar, who worked with me on X-23, who was the artist on this Moon Knight story. I begged the editor to have Edgar draw her in the bikini, and the editor said no. we're going to get crucified for that, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I'm the woman on this project. And I am telling you, I want her in the bikini and I will jump on you want somebody crucified? I'll jump on the cross. I want this. And he says, no, we're just putting her in cutoffs and a tank top. And we went back and forth. I have the email there. We went back and forth. I was like, I don't have enough pull to threaten to walk, but I want him. But yes. And I told Salvaluto that, and he was like, oh, she looked good. I was like, yeah, but I wanted her in the bikini. And I know that somebody already owns that page and I've searched for it and I can't afford it. But God, if I ever got that page.
So I laughed so hard at, well, it's not even that. And we've had this happen with other interviews. So Anthony has like his little sketch of like what he wants to ask. Second bullet point for Dark Moon Knight. Nice to see Marlene take an active role in a Moon Knight story. It was just funny the way that was like the immediate point. And Anthony does that so well so many times where, and I'm saying this as a psychiatrist, I'm like, it's one thing to read something, it's another thing to understand like where someone's going with this. And I mean, that usually tells me we're interviewing the right people because they're getting their point across. You know, that's beautiful.
I hope. I love the fact that Marlene takes her destiny in her own hands in this. And I love the fact that she is drawn strong and she is drawn badass. Because in the Mark Spector Moon Knight series, Marlene trains with Mark. She's not just sitting on the sidelines. She trains with him. And so she's just as badass as he is. So when we came to making her of the character Luminary, she had always had this complicated relationship with Khonshu. And there's a whole thing where Mark says, like, did you destroy the statue? And it's a storyline, a prior storyline with Midnight Man. And she says, if I destroyed the statue, would it matter? Would it matter if this one was a copy versus the original? Would that matter? Would you believe in it any less? Would it have any less or more power over you? So I wanted to bring that in. And so she, the statue's in Mark's office and she beats the shit out of it and she spits on it and she crashes it to the floor. And we have this moment where, you read any type of mythology, you know that the gods are all narcissists and we are all just pawns for them. And they will flatter us and tell us everything that we want to hear in order to have us do their bidding in one way or another. I mean, why do you think there's so many demigods? Because Zeus is a whore. You know what I mean? Like, but so much of that is that's so part and parcel of any mythology. I mean, that's a very, Joseph Campbell, hero with 1,000 faces kind of thing. Any mythology across any culture, that idea of the gods manipulating, it's everywhere. So I wanted this idea of she's obviously not going to be easily manipulated by Khonshu because she hates him because of what he did to Mark. So obviously the opposite of the moon is the sun. And in this storyline of, if you read Mark Spector Moon Knight, Mark's friend Spence is an art dealer, an art collector and everything. So having these artifacts around it lives within that same story. And people who are fans of this particular run would understand that. We bring Spence in, we bring Samuels in and everything. There is one thing that got cut. So originally, when we see Marlene beating up the guys, we see Marlene helping the young person who's on the roof and giving them light. And the idea is that, the light can shine your way, but the light can also burn you. And so then we see Marlene beating the crap out of, the guys in the alley. One of the things that I wanted to have that got cut for space, because you only had 30 pages, and I say only, but there was a scene where Marlene was getting ready for the party. And you would see an image of Marlene and she would be beaten up because she, was part of this fight. So you would see the bruises and everything and she'd be applying makeup. And over the voiceover for this was Spence and Frenchie having a conversation. And they were talking about how worried they were for her and how worried they were about her. Frenchie from the point knowing that she's Luminary, Spence from the point of only knowing that she's grieving for Mark. So it was Frenchie's worried about Luminary and seeing what that had done to his best friend Mark. And then Spence completely on the outside. And they were having this conversation about how they were worried. And Frenchie, on one hand, was agreeing with Spence and was saying, yes, but on the other hand, he was turning around and saying, but, Marlene is stronger than you think, blah, 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 and this, that, and the next thing. And they were just back and forth. So you would see Spence and Frenchie talking, and then you would see Marlene putting on the makeup and getting dressed and putting on basically the mask of the facade of, who she has to be. And that scarf that she wears, the original origin of that scarf. And again, this is, if I had 2 more pages, I could have done this. We go back to Frenchie and Spence speaking, and Spence says, but I'm just worried about her. And then Marlene speaks off panel and says, worried about who? And you see her, and she's in the dress, and she looks beautiful. She does not have the scarf. Frenchie is actually wearing the scarf. It's Pashtouche. He's actually wearing it. And he goes over to her, and he gives her a kiss. And when he kisses her on the cheek, he sees over her shoulder, and she has a bruise on her back.
Mm-hmm.
And he whispers in her ear, you missed this. And he puts the scarf on her shoulders like a shawl to cover the bruise on her back. He is facilitating and what's the word I'm looking for? He's facilitating the ruse and the facade. At the same time, he's
enabling it. Yep.
He's enabling at the same time. And that's a guilt that he feels at the end of the issue. He still feels that, but I think that having that moment of him putting the Pashtouche on her, putting it as a shawl for her to cover her, would have made it hit a little bit more at the end.
That is such a beautiful moment. And
I know.
I'm really glad to hear the story about it, because I could absolutely picture it in my mind. But I'm really sad that we got deprived of that, because to that point, it would have added so much more. Can we get like a director's cut or,
I would love to do that. I mean, we kept the shawl in because she uses it as a weapon later in this, then the next thing. And the way that Edgar drew it and Arif Pratano had colored it and everything, the way we did it, Clayton Cowles was our letterer, it flowed and it worked fine and everything. But in the back of my mind, I was like, that shawl means it is so much more than just here. She's just wearing this scarf. She's wearing this shawl for this party. There was a history behind that one little thing. And that's, and that comes down to the whole kill your darlings thing, like let it go, blah, blah, blah. I mean, with the Daredevil annual that I did back in 2018, there was a back and forth between Misty Knight and Matt and Misty's partner, Carmen, because originally in that was the only page that you would see Matt in, because Matt is not in anywhere in that Daredevil issue. It's just Daredevil. And the one page that we had them in if you know anything about New York, you know that there's a rivalry between Papaya King and Grace Papaya.
Yeah.
And so there was a joke where Misty and Carmen are in the park and they're eating hot dogs, and Matt comes by and he says, "Oh, Grace Papaya?" And she goes, "Yeah, of course." And he goes, "Papaya King's better." And he walks off. And I was like, they have a little conversation and it makes sense and I was like, this is the most New York joke I could ever write. And the editor was like, "I love it, but we've got to cut it. This is a superhero story. We need one more page for the fight scenes."
Oh, God.
And I'm like, but no.
Oh, come on. And we've spoken about this possibly with you and certainly with other creators and just in general on the show, that the punchy is cool. It makes for great splash pages. But unless you understand the characters, unless you get into the why, the punchy just falls flat. I mean, again, it's cool. Yeah, there's some badass splash pages, and okay, we get a 2-page spread and this and that. Yeah, it's awesome. Wow, that's really awesome. It looks great, but it's like fondant. It looks great, but it tastes like shit unless the cake itself is good. You need the cake underneath to support the decorations. Otherwise, you're just eating styrofoam. So
yeah, wet cardboard.
Yeah.
So speaking of Daredevil, that was one of the next things that you worked on is the Gang War miniseries. Now, you were just talking that you previously written Matt as Daredevil.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're writing Elektra as Daredevil. So what is it like to write a legacy character that has obviously is a different person, but still carrying on that mantle? And so how do you find the different voice for Matt as Daredevil versus Elektra as Daredevil?
Well, Marco Cicchetto and Chip Zdarsky had already established Elektra as Daredevil in their previous run, and Saladin Ahmed is writing Matt and Elektra in with Aaron Cooter in this current what would be considered the current Daredevil run. So her voice was pretty established, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to look at her from a different perspective, because she's an assassin. She is someone who is unapologetic about killing, and she had made a promise to Matt that the only way that she would be able to wear the Daredevil outfit, to put the DD on her chest and to wear the horns, is if she promised that she wouldn't kill. Because the whole reason why she became Daredevil was because Matt accidentally killed somebody and ended up in prison. And then Elektra became the Daredevil for Hell's Kitchen while Matt was in prison. So I wanted to examine, and I've sort of gotten into this, and I'm hoping to work with Elektra more to be able to look into this more. But I want to examine Elektra's relationship to violence as almost someone who is examining their relationship to alcohol or to drugs. So I've been very open about being in recovery. I've been in recovery. Next month, it'll be 15 years. And before you make that statement and say, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a drug addict, before you have that self-realization, there are, or at least in my journey, in my personal journey, there are moments where you second guess yourself, or you say, oh, I'm being over dramatic, or you have friends or family. If you try and discuss it with them, they'll say, oh, you're being hyper dramatic. It's not, you don't have a problem, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure, Doc, I'm sure you've dealt with this through, while counseling people, but also, people coming to you. And, and it's, so somebody going up to Elektra and saying, what, you're not killing? What's that all about? As opposed to someone coming up to you at a party and being like, what, you're not having a drink? What's that all about?
Right.
So I'm trying to focus on examining her relationship to, because this is, again, like X-23, this is someone who has been trained as a killer from a very young age. I mean, she started training when she was 12 years old. She was training with Maestro, and then she was training with Stick and everything. So it's a matter of, what is her relationship with violence? What is is it a need for violence? Is it a want for violence? Because that's something, as an addict, you ask yourself, like, is it a need to consume alcohol, to consume drugs? Is it a need, or is it a want? And that's something that, like I said, it's, in my own personal journey of recovery, that's something that I had to examine, and I'm trying to work through her, trying to examine that, because that is something that Elektra and violence are part and parcel of each other. They are linked. And when you think about, her introduction, the first time I think it was Punisher 27, I think it was it Garth Ennis and Tom Mandrake, I think, where the first time the Punisher meets Elektra, she's literally holding a human heart. And she's just gone and killed people because she was bored. So what is her relationship with violence? And that's something that I kind of want to, and because, she is now Daredevil because Matt lost his edge. He lost his ability to control himself, and violence overtook him. And that's why she then had to step in. So that's basically the way I'm trying to work with her and to look at how she deals with things, and also how other heroes see her, because Spider-Man asks her a few times, did you kill somebody? And she says, no matter what I do, that's a mark that I'm never going to get off of me. And as someone in recovery, there are certain, you try and make amends, but there are some people that you can't make amends to because if you try to, you're going to open up a wound and you're going to do more harm than good. So that's something that she sort of internally deals with. And she said, they'll always see me as an assassin, no matter how many good deeds I do. Some of them will always see me as an assassin. And so I was trying to sort of bring that in. And it's a little more, I mean, it's a little more subtle than some of the other things that I've done. But that's basically where I kind of was in terms of building that character and working on that character. I mean, but there was a really good foundation already there from, Chip Zdarsky and Marco Cicchetto, and Saladin and Aaron, Saladin Ahmed and Aaron Cooter are working with her more and building her out more as well.
It's interesting you brought up the interactions with Spider-Man and stuff like that, because that was something that when I was reading the Gang War tie-in and stuff, and Pete it wasn't digging in Elektra. It was just, I found it, I don't want to say necessarily entire out of character, but I was just like, I don't know that, as much as I know Peter doesn't kill, et cetera, that I also don't know that he would grill Elektra like that. So that was something that, when I was reading it, and I'm not trying to, criticize or
no,
push back on the decisions, whatever, because of Pete's position as the heart of the Avengers and the Marvel universe.
No, but he's a needler.
As a larger
See,
whole.
I take a different.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know that I'm not saying it was entirely out of character, because Peter is a ball buster. Like we know that, but I just, maybe it was, maybe I was hearing it in a different, or reading it in a different tone than it may have been intended. When you're reading text, I certainly encounter this all the time in my personal life, that, when you send a text to somebody, or when you send an email, whatever.
There's that great Key and Peele about the text messages.
Yeah, you intend to write it in one way and it's heard in something completely different. One of my good friends and I always said we wanted to create Sarcastifont, a font for specifically to clarify whether you're being sarcastic about something.
I am learning that so much with my daughter now that she has a phone, and we both have tons of sarcasm. Well, who am I kidding? We have problems face to face with this. So
I will say this. I'll give you a little inside baseball on this. So when Gang War when I was told about Gang War, I was told that Peter is, quote, a general. Okay. Gang War started in ASM, started in Amazing Spider-Man, and then it sort of branched out. And I was given not an edict, but I was basically told Peter's the general. Luke Cage is a general. Everyone else has, because Luke Cage, he still is mayor in the Marvel Universe, but at the time he had just become mayor. Mm-hmm. So you have Luke and you have Pete, and they're the, quote, generals. And so in thinking of Pete being a general and Elektra being a soldier, that's the way it was thought of. And I can't get too into it, but I will tell you this. There was a moment that was originally written, it did not go to press, where Pete got a little rough and tumble. And when I was originally writing that back and forth between Elektra and Peter, she actually questions him about it. Because she witnessed what was originally written as Pete getting a little rough and tumble. And so she was like thinking, it wasn't like she was needling him, but she was like, you see, it's not so hard to go over the edge or to peek over the edge. Like he didn't go over the edge, but like she has, but like it's not so difficult to really lose yourself in the moment. And then when they were settling with final art and et cetera, that was taken out and my line was still in there. And the editor said to me, oh crap, we got to change this. And I was like, what do you mean? Because I hadn't seen the revised version. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like going through my emails. I was like, no, this is the script that I was given and on this page and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, no, that got changed. I was like, oh, well, nice to tell me. So I had to rescript that and then take it to Peter being almost self-righteous. And that's kind of the way I looked at it, was Peter being self-righteous about, even I, a general of this great war in Gang War, all of this stuff that we endured in Central Park, even I kept my cool, kind of
Mm.
thing. And that's why it sort of bothered Elektra. But the art had already been done. So it was a way of trying to, I had to make dialogue that obviously complemented the art, because then otherwise we've all read comics and the dialogue and the art
Mhm.
do not match. And you're like, oh, this is jarring. But I will say that, yes, this idea of Peter being a general was where I had sort of leaned into him being a little more authoritative, a little more, I can tell Elektra off, but not really tell her off, because I don't want to, but then they have that where he's like waving his hand in front of her face and she grabs his wrist just to say,
Yeah.
like, look, you might be the general, you might have been like, appointed by Mayor Cage, but I don't answer to anybody. I barely even answer to Matt, kind of thing.
Yeah, this is, once again, this is why for all the creator interviews we do, this is why Anthony is the lead on it and I'm the sidekick, because the way you just answered that, once again, his own bullet point, like, what's it like in terms of working with a tie-in, what type of constraints you have with that. I mean, you just answered that.
That's literally was the next thing. What's it like working on an event tie-in? How much freedom do you have for the story you want to tell within obvious constraints, and how much editorial oversight, etc.? And then you proceed to just explain everything. And I was like, well, I don't have to ask the question because you answered it already.
I will say this. Tie-ins are interesting because I cannot go too into it, but as of this year, because I said I'm going to have a book on the shelf from Marvel every single month this year. As of this year, I will have worked on 3, possibly 4 different tie-ins. And Gang War is its own experience versus the other 2 tie-ins that I'm currently working on. Some, they kind of feel like we're laying the track while the train's running. Others, I mean, I'm a planner. I've spoken about my process in the past. I'm definitely a planner, and I am being challenged to do things on the fly, and it is way, way, way out of my comfort zone.
You're
But
speaking my language.
well, that's the thing is, and Anthony, I'm sure you can speak to this idea of you have to pivot when someone comes in with through discovery. You have to pivot. And Doc, I'm sure, you get bombs
boy.
dropped every day.
Yeah.
So it's like, I want to be able to plan things out, and I want everything to be nice and neat, because my pre-life before all of this was anything but. And so I am now overcompensating, which I know you see with a lot of people in recovery. They hypercompensate for basically trying to make up. It's like you're doing your own personal penance to try and make up for all the insanity that you put other people through, that now you hypercompensate. And so, like, my good friend Daryl always teases me. He's like, "Oh, you're the one who does their homework the second they get home from school." I was like, "Yeah, but when I was in school, I was not the one doing my homework the second I got home from school." So I'm overcompensating.
Yeah.
And so, trying to juggle working on 2 completely different crossovers at the same exact time with multiple editorial teams, multiple different creators. I hate Slack. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, wow.
I hate Slack. And then going back and forth. And then, like, I was literally on a call today, and I was like, so basically from pages 10 on, I have to rework my story because it doesn't fit in within the confines of this person, that person, the next person, whatever. And it is just, it's threading the needle from 40 feet away. I mean, Odysseus made the shot. I can't. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So it's very interesting. I will say with Gang War, when we started Gang War, there was this like huge Zoom call. Like, there were so many people on the Zoom call, like my laptop almost died. And it was like everybody was talking, and it was tons of editors and tons of creators and everything. And everybody's talking and blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do the next thing. And I had barely even known what character I was going to be writing. And then one of the editors who's pretty high up on the food chain basically stops everything and then goes, "But Erica, what is it you're going to do?" And if you've ever seen Dirty Dancing, when she says, I carried a watermelon, it was
Yep.
literally an I carried a watermelon moment. I was like, well, I'd like to write a really fun story
Yeah.
about this particular character, but I
Mm.
don't want to step on anybody's toes. So maybe I can do okay. And like I totally froze.
Spotlight.
I totally
Yeah.
froze. And I
Mhm.
could tell that I absolutely did not impress this person. And they're just like, okay, so and so, as you were saying. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, turn the camera off and go cry.
Yeah.
But it's like I try and plan things. I try and make sure I try and get my outlines approved at the same time. And Doc, you can speak to this as well.
Mhm.
You go from one end of the spectrum to the other. There's now a rigidity
Yeah.
that you have to learn to loosen up. So I'm working through and I'm trying to find my balance. It
Yeah.
is, I mean, having worked in creator owned for so long,
Hmm.
you know, I'm calling the shots on that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's basically like I'm calling the shots. Yes, I had done, I had worked with clients and done IP work before, but it wasn't to the point that it is now, where the
Yeah.
vast majority of the work that I'm doing is IP work.
Yeah. It reminds me of the quote from, former President Eisenhower: "A plan is useless, but planning is indispensable."
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. That's Oh boy. I mean, I gotta admit, this kind of triggered in terms of there were a few situations where, and it's going to happen over and over again in the area where I work, but I can make changes to medications. I can offer therapy. I can have patients say, thank you so much for everything that all of you have done in the hospital, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, I'm homeless. Yeah, I like certain social determinants. I can say whatever I want to say. I can prescribe whatever I want to prescribe. I'm not able to say with a straight face or with a clean conscience, like, oh yeah, well, I can help you overcome that. Like, that's not fair from a societal standpoint, or just how I feel towards the person. Even like, holy crap, I don't know what to do. And so that's a different scale, but it's similar in the sense that I realize then that my role is in how well am I implementing my process, so that whatever minor incremental thing that comes about with all of this is better than it would have been if I weren't involved at all. And so as a creator, I think that applies as well, where I have no idea how this is going to match the vision of this entire arc. I have no clue if people are going to appreciate it as much if I had carte blanche to do what I wanted. But thank you for having this niche that, believe me, when it comes to your style, you still have people like Anthony and I to appreciate.
Well, I appreciate that. And I mean, from the position of being a doctor or a lawyer, I mean, you both are in such specialized fields that not only take training, but it's multiple years of training, and it's constant training because laws are changing and medicine is changing and therapies of people, of treatments are changing.
Yeah.
And so in your worlds, you almost feel as if it's never enough. And I can only imagine how that feels from your standpoint. I studied for X amount of years and took the boards and did this and did that, passed the bar, all of that, and yet it's still not enough because the laws are going to change. Or this treatment that I've spent years researching, well, now that it's peer reviewed, it falls apart. It's never enough. And I
Selling
feel,
against the tide.
well, yeah. And I know as a creator, I feel like everything that I put in, now, obviously, I'm not dealing with literal lives as the two of you are. I'm dealing with fictional lives. But as a creator, I'll put in as much as I can of myself into everything. And when you see a review that says meh, or even, and that's, I think, meh is the worst reviews.
Mm,
If you are moved by it to the point where it gives you any extreme, either you hate it vehemently or you love it vehemently, that's what I want. Meh is the worst review possible.
mm.
And because I got to move the needle, I have to have said, presented something. And it's not just me. I mean, it's the total package, but I've been so fortunate to have worked with so many incredible artists. I can't blame it on the art, let's be honest. So it's got to be the setup, which I'm kind of mostly responsible for. Obviously the editors will come in and sort of curate and sort of keep you within those guardrails kind of thing. And I would say that when it comes to editorial when you're doing a cross office kind of thing, it gets very complicated. Like dark web was 99.9% in the Spider-Man office, and then you had a little X-Men stuff. But gang war went across multiple. You had the Avengers office involved. You had the Spider-Man office. You had the symbiote office. You had, Daredevil office. I mean, it was a lot. And there was a lot of cross-pollination and what's this person doing? What's that person doing? And not really, does the left hand know what the right's doing kind of thing. And so a lot of it came down to having to think on the fly. And it's so funny how I think about back in the day when I had not a care in the world because I was, let's be honest, I was altered in one way or another. I would easily be able to think on the fly because I had it's like when a drunk person gets into a car accident. A lot of times they don't get injured because they're just so loose.
Yeah.
And everything.
You didn't have any mooring to hold you.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, okay, I'll do this. Oh, this pops up. Okay, yeah, sure.
I had nothing anchoring me. And now that I have everything anchoring me and everything to lose, I take it so seriously. And it's funny, there was an editor who I was talking to, and she's like, you're literally just banging action figures together. And I understand the absurdity of my job. I genuinely do. And I understand how, like, I'm staring at a Captain America shield right now. Like, I understand the absurdity of this job. But for somebody like me, and again, it could be, you don't have to have a background like I do, but for somebody like me, I need this as an anchor. And I need to take this seriously. And I need to treat this as a job. Because if I don't treat it as a job, then it doesn't mean anything. And I'm sure you can speak to this, Doc, in the sense that one of the things, and it's not healthy, and I 100%, I admit this, but we tend to associate our self-worth with our work.
Yep.
And it is not it is absolutely not healthy, and I acknowledge that.
Well,
100%.
Please, because that, and Anthony will sign off on this. That's pretty much what a doctor's life, for many of us, that's what a doctor's life is. It's you've oh man.
I'm sorry I hit a nerve.
No. What I'm getting at is
we've talked about this all the time on the show.
This isn't new. I mean, it's just, I used to call it a crisis of calling. It's the idea that even taking the Hippocratic Oath, of course, it's first do no harm, but there are many things related to that oath where you're vowing to society that you have a certain worth that you're putting out in the world. But the part that no one says out loud, or they used to not say it out loud, people like me are now saying it out loud, is no, you're actually saying that you're willing to sacrifice a large part of who you are for the sake of everyone else. And that is something that you consider to be a shield of honor until it's not, until burnout sets in, or until something negative does happen and you don't say, wow, that's an unfortunate thing and this person was harmed. It's, wow, I'm a horrible human being and I'll never be worthy again. That's the true downside to it. And it's something that healthcare itself has just really started to come around on. So you're absolutely correct with that. And the more research we do, the more we are finding out that one of the best ways to combat that is to recognize that things that are quote unquote unimportant, including things that are, things that are what people would consider to be hobbies, things that people would say are not that vital to life. Actually, those are the things that allow for a person to find more meaning and purpose than anything else. So that's why we do this podcast. The comics, entertainment, all of this stuff. We realize as a society, we say those things aren't quote unquote important. And yet when we take them away or when they are disrupted in some major way, things start to break down really quick.
Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for.
Yes. And it's true.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. But we saw that during the pandemic was a whole thing of people with all of this time on their hands that they didn't otherwise have because they lost their jobs or this or that. They took up bread making, or they took up art, or they started podcasts. Do you know how many podcasts got started during the pandemic because people were home?
I weave bracelets,
nice. This and that. I mean, that's the whole thing of, and you can talk about the privilege of the wealthy taking a gap year or, taking a break between high school and college for whatever reason. What do? They go art, they travel, they do all these things.
They experience
because they're not beholden, because they have the privilege of not having to work to survive, because they're the elites under the capitalist system. So they have the freedom to do that, whereas the rest of us don't. That we have to continue to work to put a roof over our heads because we don't have an 8-figure bank account.
I was going to say, Anthony, are you referring to the haves and the have-nots?
I most certainly am. And this actually is one of the bullet points that I was going to talk about with Rat City. I guess I'll just segue then. I love the commentary on the soldiers being chewed up and spit out, the flaws of capitalism, the whole, they're talking, because Doc and I did, without getting into too many spoilers, we were able to read, an advanced copy of issue 1, and it's absolutely fantastic. But I love the commentary that's in there about, you have these gilded people who, their feet never touch the ground, I think was the one line in there, or something very similar to that. These wealthy people. Meanwhile, this guy is in the slums. He's in Rat City. It's just, and it's a story. I'm not saying this to be a derogatory. It's a story that's been told 1,000 times before. It's this whole, the many looking up at, the few that are looking down, but I really appreciated that. And like I said, it just kind of tied into, what we were talking about. So the first question then, or the first thing I guess that I want to mention is, when we had you on, I think it was last time, you mentioned that there was a Spawn cover for Deadliest Bouquet, which was completely unrelated to the story. It was just like, we're doing a whole bunch, this is going to be a month of Spawn covers.
It was the 30th anniversary of Spawn. Yeah.
Yeah. So, they were doing variant covers on all the books. So you had this Spawn variant for Deadliest Bouquet, completely unrelated to the content. But now you are working on an actual Spawn universe book. How did that come about?
I had spoken to Thomas Healy, who is the editor-in-chief over at Todd McFarlane Productions. And I had spoken to him about doing a Spawn book in 2022 at New York Comic Con. And we chatted. So when we did the Spawn variant cover for the Deadliest Bouquet, it was in the back of my mind that I might be doing something with Spawn, but it was by no means a lock. By no means. I mean, so we had met, so New York Comic Con is in October, and then we ended up not really being able to, because then you've got November, you've got the holidays in December, and then New Year's. I mean, everything sort of snowballs. And I don't blame anybody, because, people have families and they've got all tons of stuff going on. And so I didn't get a chance to really sit down with Thomas and really talk to him until pretty much early February of last year. And so, because you talk at New York Comic Con, but you can't really conduct business, for lack of a better term. I mean, you're on the floor. There's 900 things going on. There are people walking by. You're consistently getting interrupted because if you have a table and you're trying to sell your books, you can't exactly shrug off somebody who's trying to come and buy a book. I mean, these tables are $540. Like, you got to make your money back. You know what I mean? So it's a matter of, here's my card. Let's chat later. Send me an email, kind of thing. So I didn't know that it was going to happen. It was still kind of nebulous at the time, but we sat down and we talked, and we had a Zoom call, and Thomas had explained to me the type of thing that Todd is looking for. And I sort of riffed on this story. I mean, it's similar to a story that I had written years ago that I never really did anything with, that I'm sort of very much, I'm mining that story that never went anywhere. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm mining from that for Spawn, because that story, although it didn't take place in the future, that story did have an ex-soldier. In that story, though, he was more of like a Mark Spector kind of mercenary character. So there's some things that I've taken a little bit of him and made him into another character and stuff. It's a lot of it is like just taking the puzzle pieces and fitting them in one way and then fitting them in another way and making it work. So yeah, I mean, I pitched this idea of, going into the future, because that's something that they haven't sustained in the Spawn universe. I mean, they've had, leaps to the future, but it's never been a story that is consistently in the future. And also it's uncharted territory for Spawn. So it gives me a little more freedom. Even though I am beholden to canon, I have a little more leeway. And Jay Carlos, who is the artist on this, who I can't say enough good things, just phenomenal artist. So kind and giving of himself into the story. Really just a beautiful person. And I'm very, very lucky to be, I said, it's an embarrassment of riches, the artists that I get to work with on projects, because I'm spoiled with the artists that I work with. And so Jay's done a really great job in terms of the designing of the character. And I've learned a lot about my style of storytelling, and also how the art how I'll tell a story, Jay will interpret that story, and then after viewing Jay's interpretation, how that will then influence the way the story is going to go. So to say that it is collaborative is absolutely 100%. This is a truly collaborative kind of thing. It's not like I write a script, I hand it to you, and then I don't go back to it until the art's done and do a lettering pass. And I had wanted to tell the story about the haves and have-nots and the idea of the soldier being shit on, basically because my grandfathers were in World War II. They were all in the army. My father was in the army during Vietnam. And when my grandfathers came back, they literally got a parade. And when my father came back, not him personally, but people like him literally got spit on.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that, and when I was working in Manhattan, I would see homeless vets constantly. And that is something that always hurt. It always hurt to see. My grandfather was an amputee. One of my grandfathers was an amputee. And it's funny, I never knew my grandfather without 1.5 legs. I never knew him with 2 legs. He had his leg amputated from the knee down, and from just below to the knee, rather, down. And I remember being a child and seeing how he would struggle sometimes, even when he had his prosthetic on.
Mm.
I remember he had the cheapest prosthetic possible. It was literally a hollow mannequin leg that he put a shoe on.
Mm-hmm.
And when he would go to bed at night, he would take it off. And when I saw Empire Strikes Back and I saw the scene where the helmet comes back onto Vader's head, that sound it makes, it didn't actually make that sound when he removed it, but in my head, it always did.
Yeah. Understood.
Wow. Okay.
And so, well, we won't discuss how, but you read the first issue, and that frustration that Peter has toward the end, where he just wants relief.
Yeah.
And he can't get it.
That gives a lot of perspective to that. Wow. That's powerful.
And this is the thing, is like, people aren't going to see it and people aren't going to understand that, but that's where I went, because my grandfather was in constant pain. He had this machine that was like a vibrating massager. And I learned later that people would use it to masturbate, which I learned that when I was much older. When I was much older, I learned that. But it was this thing where he would literally just like massage the leg, and it would help increase blood flow and help, take some of the pain away and stuff. And I remember that because before he would go to bed every night, if we were staying in the Bronx, because that's my grandparents lived in the Bronx. So if we were staying the weekend in the Bronx, it would be, okay, go kiss grandpa goodnight. And I remember him sitting on the edge of the bed and the pajama leg just being hollow and just falling, there nothing being there. And then you would turn and you would look and you would see the mannequin leg with a shoe and a sock pulled up with the sock girders leaning up against the wall. And so I channeled all of that. And again, this is so inside baseball, but I channeled all of that into Peter, into who he was, how his disability affects him, how he compensates for his disability and such. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty powerful story. And we're going to do some crazy Spawn stuff. And there's going to be things that you think should be in a Spawn comic will be in the Spawn comic. But this is a Spawn comic that isn't always really a Spawn comic. And sometimes is a Spawn comic, but isn't a Spawn comic. I'm not going to be highfalutin and say, I'm elevating the medium. No, I'm not doing that. I write comic books. Let's be honest. I write comic books. I'm not doing anything for A24 or, one of these Sony classics. I'm not getting Ben Affleck to direct anything anytime soon. But basically I wanted to go there for myself, and I wanted to put that into it. And because of that, I mean, it is writing this story is kind of exhausting because I'm going back to memories as a child that part of me doesn't want to have to go back, but you have to go back and feel that. You have to feel, you have to literally feel tripping over the leg as you're trying to get out of the room because you're scared of it and you're trying to get out as fast as humanly possible. But you got to say goodnight to grandpa and you got to give him a kiss goodnight before everybody piles in on the couch bed in the living room. You know what I mean? Like you have to do that. It's been taking me a while to write it. I'm not writing the story as fast as I want to. In fact, I have on my list of things to do that I just finished issue number 7. I should be way farther. And Jay is so fast. Oh man, every day I'm getting pages in the inbox and I'm like, oh man. And my whole thing was, you have to be at least 2 issues ahead of him because I don't want to ever be the bottleneck. So we finished issue 6 and that is the first arc. And so I'm now starting this new arc. And the first arc was so exhausting that like, there's a part of me that's like, once more onto the breach. So I'm going to try and the second arc is going to be just as deep, but I'm going to try and keep myself on the shallow end for my own sanity.
Yeah, I appreciate that level of self-awareness.
Well, it's like people who go into like method acting, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm literally staring at a photograph of my grandfather right now over my shoulder. And it's a matter of like, there's so much that you're picking apart. It's like if somebody dumped out a giant tub of sprinkles and told you to separate them by color. And that's what you got to do. But you've got like peanut butter on your hands.
Yeah.
So writing comics is deep.
But well, see, it's funny because you're like, I'm not really elevating the medium. I'm just writing comics. But by the same token, you just spent 10 minutes.
I know. I talked too much. I'm sorry.
No. Gonna stop you right there. I say this all the time to my kid. Do not apologize for something that's not, I'm not upset about. I love it because all of that comes through. All of that stuff. Yes, it's not on the page per se, but the care and the authenticity of those experiences bleed through every goddamn word, every pencil line, even though you're not the one, drawing it. Every movement, every panel, every page is imbued with the life of a real person in 2 dimensions.
And I'll say this, and I'm not gonna give away too much, obviously, because that's not my place to do. But at some point, there's also a doctor involved in this, and as I was reading it, because I did part of my training through the VA system, and I definitely talked to people that had things happen, and many people handled it many different ways. As I'm reading this, I'm thinking to myself, with every fiber of my being, this is who I never wanted to ever become. It like that hit. I know that wasn't your intention. I'm just saying it hit me in a way. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. I think I've taken the light path as opposed to the dark side.
Well, I'll tell you, they both get worse.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I gotta have a villain.
yeah, I know. Oh, I get it.
We understand that. But my point was just that, again, to counter what you were saying, your insertion of all of this stuff does elevate the genre, because you could have just very clearly said, well, this is this character and this is going through this stuff, and then move on to the conflict or move on to whatever big story that you're going to tell. But you take the time to get us to care. You take the time to make this real, to make us understand, to make us empathize with these characters, not just in this book, but again, in so many other things that you've written. And that's why that's why we love having you back. That's why we love talking to folks like you or a Philip Kennedy Johnson, who take the time to put so much into the story and your process that isn't directly written necessarily on the page, but is there. And it comes through. And so again, I say this, as a total compliment, and I'm not trying to blow smoke or sound like a fanboy, but all of this stuff is apparent when you read it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And we appreciate what you put into it.
I just want to be liked.
Well, that's why my reaction was my reaction. It's at this point, like you just dropped the bombshell everywhere. I'm thinking like, all right, this is going to be tough for me in that perspective, not the story itself. Like the story itself, I think I can get through. I unfortunately decided to insert my own crap into it, which once again is one of those things when it comes to any, especially fiction stuff. Like that's just naturally what happens. You can't help for people that write a certain way to just get sucked in, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. I'm gonna see this through, and whatever emotions are evoked, then let's go. We're processing this together.
Well, I mean, like if I reread Globulin Green, that storyline with Harry and everything, I mean, the way that people are portrayed, the way that people in recovery, pre-recovery, are portrayed in media, whether it's books or films or whatever, a lot of times it's like, yeah, sometimes that's the way it is, but other times it's just you're curled up in a ball on the floor crying for 3 days straight. But that's not dramatic. Like that's not fun. That's not anything to like. They want to see you like puking your guts out, during withdrawal or trying to jack somebody at an ATM or something like that. So I mean, like, everybody's going to get something out of it, whatever it is. The fact that I'm sorry, the doctor's the bad guy.
Oh, don't apologize. Don't worry about that. Like I said,
believe me, there's going to be plenty of bad guys, but there's somebody even worse than the doctor. How's that?
Okay.
The doctor's going to get bad, but there's somebody even worse than the doctor.
All right.
Okay. I mean, that's what makes The Godfather compelling, is you're not supposed to root for Michael Corleone. It's just that compared to everybody else, he's the least assholish of the group. You're like, yeah, he's a garbage human, but these other people are worse.
Got to start somewhere.
But you know what? But the other thing is that, like, we see what drove everyone to the point where they're at. We're going to see that over the course of these, as of right now, we have our main character, Peter, and we've seen a lot of what he's been through. We're going to see more of what he's been through, but we're also going to show what Reese has been through. We're going to introduce the character of Quinlan in issue number 2. You're actually going to see Quinlan, and you're going to see who they are. And at the end of the second story arc, I believe Todd said he wanted at least 30 issues. So I'm like, great, I got to think a lot. At the end of the second story arc, we're going to see 2 different things that are going to come together that are going to show you a piece of Quinlan's past and a piece of Peter's past. And it's going to be something that we knew a little bit about from Peter, but this is going to open that up. But also it's going to be something that we didn't know at all about Quinlan. Quinlan is still kind of a mystery going into it. And little by little, we're going to see where they're from because they're very guarded. As a person, they're very guarded. So I'm treating the readers the way Quinlan would treat you in terms of what they're willing to dole out.
Excellent. Yep.
Okay. All right. So the only other question then, because you touched on so many of the other things, is how much do you have to understand Spawn to follow the story? Or is this something that you can jump in with a largely new thing? Because I'm adding it to my poll list because it's you, but outside of like a handful of literally like the first couple of issues of Spawn, I've never read anything in the universe.
All you need to know is that in issue 300, 301, I believe it was 2019 when those two issues came out, Al Simmons, who is the main Spawn character in the title Spawn, Al Simmons detonates a bomb.
Yeah.
And as Al detonates this bomb, it is in the presence of a demon and an angel. And when this bomb is detonated, Al's Hellspawn energy, heaven energy, and demon energy are all combined, and it basically has a shockwave. Like if you've ever seen the footage of the nuclear blast, you see the blast, and then the shockwave happens. You don't actually see the shockwave the second it happens. It's an after effect.
Right.
So this shockwave ripples through all time, all space, all universe, and multi-universes. So all you need to know is that Al detonates a bomb and has absolutely no clue the consequences of it. And we even have a character narrating because we show the detonation. I want to say page 18.
Yeah, it was in there. I don't remember the exact page, but yes, there was like, Al Simmons had no idea what he had done.
Yeah, Al Simmons in interviews, it's known as the necroplasmic detonation. I call it the God bomb because it's a hell of a lot easier to say. And I always, whenever I'm typing it in an interview, I always mess up how to spell necroplasmic. So yeah, it's the God bomb. So in 300 and 301, and they just had 350 come out this month. So we're 50 issues ahead. But basically, that's all you need to know is Al Simmons, the Spawn of the 1990s, did something crazy. And the collateral damage of that is this energy shockwave that hits Peter and many, many other people and causes chaos. And we're watching the chaos unfold, and we're watching how people react to the chaos.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Because like I said, we did an episode on Spawn like way back.
Yeah,
that was a whole thing because this was before before 300 had come out, and it reached a point where we were trying to, do the background on him. And we kind of hit a point where at one point we made the determination we were going to say, and here's where we stopped reading because we can't make heads or tail of what the hell is going on. So we're not even going to bother. And then we said, no, that's not really fair to the character and fans, etc. So we just said, okay, we'll just kind of like go on Wikipedia and see like what we can cobble together for the background.
They have the compendiums. I have volumes 1 and 2, which is the first 50 issues and then the next 50 issues. So I have the first 100 issues. And I had read Spawn on and off when it was coming out in the 90s. And so
I watched the cartoon, which was badass, but
I saw the film in the theater.
Yeah, same.
So basically, the title Rat City actually comes from Spawn number, I want to say 42, where it's the first time that they refer to the area of the Bowery, which is where Spawn lives. Spawn lives on the street. Al Simmons lives on the street with a bunch of unhoused people.
Yep.
A lot of them are actually Vietnam veterans. Bootsy, Bobby, a lot of them, yeah. And that area of the Bowery is called Rat City. And so we bring that into the title. Like is it cyber spawn? Is it this? Is it that? The next thing. And we brought in, we went back and forth about the title of this book 9 ways to Sunday. Like it was really, and then Thomas emails me. He's like, what about Rat City? I'm like, sure. I was like, look, they're not going to stay in New York, but there's a line that I don't think it's in the first issue. It might be in the second issue. But this idea of like you can leave Rat City, but you never get the stink off you.
Mm.
So whether the story takes place in Azerbaijan or the story takes place wherever, you're still within Rat City. Like you still feel it. And also, I mean, the world in itself within this timeline of 2111, which is the now of the story, the whole world is basically Rat City. So
yeah, it's again, like I said, having the pleasure of getting to read that advanced copy, it's going on the poll list because A, because it's you, and B, because the merits of the story itself. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm down. I'm interested in this. Again, not knowing a whole lot about the Spawn universe, but very much looking forward to seeing where this goes and reading Erica Schultz ongoing. I'm looking forward to reading an Erica Schultz ongoing. I'm like, I want to buy an issue 6 that has your name on it and being like, it goes.
Well, the first trade is 1 through 6. So that's the first story arc. So you will buy an issue 6 and you will buy an issue 7 because I've already written it. And I'm just saying, because
so much of what we've talked about here is, like, okay, 1 through 4 or 1 through 5. And I'm like, I want 6. I want 6. I want 7. I want double digits. I want all that.
On the Dropbox, I put 0001, 0002.
Nice.
So we will see.
All right.
I am required, more or less, not obviously not really required, but I'm pretty much required to go up to 30. And Jay and I have talked about where it's going to go. And I have up to 24 because we're doing 6-issue arcs. I have up to 24 basically plotted out. That last arc is kind of, as of right now, is kind of anything goes. And we've discussed like going cosmic. We've discussed going back in time.
That's what I was thinking in my head. I'm like, is this about to be like, not to pull once again for a different area, but like I was thinking cosmic Ghost Rider. Like,
we have the ability to do like that last arc that we're planning, arc number 5, which doesn't have to be the last one, but arc number 5 is so open-ended right now. Like anything is on the table, pretty much anything. Time travel, going to space, dinosaurs. Who the hell knows? If you ever want to see Spawn riding a dinosaur down Fifth Avenue, you might see it in issue number 28. Might happen.
All right. Well, we will bring you back in 2 years. 2 years and change. And
I haven't been fired from the book yet. If Todd hasn't fired me from the book, Erica, you handed in an outline where Spawn is riding a dinosaur down Fifth Avenue. Yes. Yes. I just might do it.
No, do it, because then Todd is going to turn around and turn it into like a 1.5 foot tall giant vinyl figure.
That would be so freaking cool.
I'm like,
oh my God.
Like, get that pre-order on the McFarlane Toys site. Just this giant Necroid T-Rex with green glowing eyes and shit.
Well, what I'm thinking of is the Natural History Museum.
Yes.
Is what I'm thinking of. Yep. So I'm literally thinking of the giant T-Rex in the Natural History Museum. But I haven't been to the Natural History Museum literally in 20 years. So for all I know, they've changed that up. Do they still have the big blue whale when you walk in?
I've not been to the Natural History Museum in
I was going to say
probably about 20 years myself. I go to Liberty Science Center, but
I've been to several natural history museums, but not that one. Oh man.
I'm talking about the big one on, I think it's 81st to 80th.
The big one in New York.
Right. Yeah.
On Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, because that's the problem. Because I've been, like I said, I've been to a lot of natural history museums and traveling, but I haven't been to the one in New York in a long, long time.
I mean, we used to go it was the class trip every year. They'd get you on the school bus and then drive over to the GW, and you'd go to the Natural History Museum.
Yeah.
And I remember I used to love going to the Hayden Planetarium there. Loved that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, all the kids love the dinosaurs.
Love it.
Please, love it. Here we go. See, brainstorming almost 2 hours into the interview. Love it.
Exactly.
So I know, like I said, we mentioned at the top of the show, you've got Blood Hunters, which is another Marvel tie-in to the Blood Hunt event, and then Darth Maul Black, White, and Red, which they've been really kind of digging on that, black, white, and red, black, white, and blood. This is your.
Well, Lucasfilm doesn't say anything about blood, so it has to be black, white, red.
Fair enough. I just mean, the Marvel continuing the theme of, black, white, and red, et cetera, et cetera. Anything else you've got in the hopper that you can announce yet? Or are you, well, I'm working on stuff, but I can't say anything about it.
Okay, so what do I have coming out? So April 10th is Rat City #1.
Yep.
You should definitely check that out. In May, we start on Blood Hunters, and Darth Maul will be out in June, and that's all I can talk about right now. But I'm sure there will be more stuff that is being discussed and that will be coming out, solicits and previews and stuff like that.
And then I know for Rat City, you are doing a host of different events around
tons of signings. Yes.
Yeah,
signings. The 10th, on the day that Rat City comes out, April 10th, I will be at the Geekery in Matawan. On April 13th, I will be at Eastside Mags in Montclair. On April 17th, I will be at Dewey's Comic City in Madison. And on April 20th, I will be at Final Boss Comics in Lawrence Township.
And I think I said to you at one point, like that the Eastside Mags one is probably the closest, but the signing is like a couple hours after my son's birthday party. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to have the energy.
I will have copies. I'm getting my own copies of Rat City. I will have them on my website. So if somebody wants me to sign a copy, you can always go to my website. You're going to have to pay shipping, and I will charge a little bit extra for the signature, but you're not going to be paying $30 for an issue. You're between shipping and everything, you're probably going to pay $8-9. But it's an oversized issue anyway. Issue #1 is a 32-page issue. So it is an oversized issue to begin with.
Well, like I said, yes, it'd be nice to order in the mail, but it's more about, getting out and seeing you and all that jazz. So, I will. But
I don't hold it against anybody. I mean, we're all super busy too. And so whenever anybody's like, oh my God, I'm totally going to make it to your signing. If you do, great. And if you don't, it's fine. So, yeah.
So where can folks find all of the information about your signings and all the projects that you've got, coming out?
Okay. So I am still on Twitter. I refuse to call it X.
Same.
I am still there at Erica Schultz 42. I'm on Instagram, Erica Schultz Writes, WRITES. I am on Blue Sky at Erica Schultz 42. And I am on Threads for Erica Schultz Writes. My website is also ericaschultzwrites.com. And you can go there. There's my shop. If you go to my shop there, I also have all the books that I have for sale, but I also have a link to my weaving. I weave bracelets and bookmarks and keychains and all kinds of stuff doing cotton weaving. Friendship bracelets are like a big thing right now for Swifties. I've been rocking my friendship bracelets since the 80s and 90s, and I keep rocking them. So yeah, you can go and pick up some stuff like that too. I'm putting more stuff up. I posted on Instagram this giant pile of things that I've been weaving that I just need to photograph and get on the site, which is always that little extra thing that you're like, oh man, I got to do that too.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, sincerely, for taking like 2 hours of your evening. I know you had mentioned during like the pre-roll and stuff that you had already recorded other podcast appearances.
This is my marathon. Marathon. I've been recording podcasts straight since 6. So it's 10-12.
It is. Yeah. It's after 10 p.m. So it's.
Do you know where your children are?
Beat me to it. Wow.
I know where my children are. I'm looking at them right on the monitor because my wife had a medical procedure earlier today. So I was just like, I will take the monitor. I'll put it on silent mode. Worst case scenario, I have to, hop upstairs and take care of things.
I hope she feels better.
Yeah. It's just she needs rest and stuff like that. It was just more, recovery than anything else.
Rest and healing.
Yes. Oh, you don't have to tell me. Rest is absolutely a part of healing. Erica, as always, love and appreciate everything you do. Appreciate you taking the time. If you are in the New Jersey area, please go to those signings. We've already posted about it on our Twitter feed. We will, be posting stuff about it on social media. And then, again, to promote this episode, we'll be all over the socials and blasting this everywhere because Rat City is a fantastic book. and very much looking forward to reading that, as well as all of the many other Marvel books that, you have announced or, could potentially announce in the future. Anything else that you're working on. Like I said, I've got a tab that says Erica Schultz books in my comic drawer. So I just, whenever you're working on, it's like, oh, okay, she's in this. Okay, cool. I'm getting that, adding it, and it gets put in the drawer. So, and it's because of all of the hard work and effort that, again, we put in, or that, we said that you put into everything that you write. And that's why we've had you back on as many times as you have. So you'll be back on for number 7 at some point,
when
later this
Spawn
year.
rides the dinosaur.
Yes, certainly when Spawn rides the dinosaur. Yes, when that comes out in 2 years, whatever. Hopefully by then it will be, appearance number 9 or 10, whatever the case may be. So anyway, thank you very much, Doc. You want anything you want to?
No, I will say this, like, we can't say everything that we know, but wow, you do not cease to amaze. Thank you so much for all the hard work that you're doing.
Look, for the two of you, thank you for what you're doing, because not only, like you said, not only are you putting yourselves out there creatively for yourselves, to enrich yourselves, but also entertainment for other people. So thank you for doing that. And we talked about how important that actually is for mental health and for our own emotional healing. So thank you for doing that. Thank you both for doing what you do professionally, helping people. It's important, and I don't think you get thanked enough for it. So writing books about action figures banging together, that's nothing. You guys do the real work. So, but thank you.
Well, thank you again for everything. For Erica Schultz, for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko, and thank you for listening. We will see you next time.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.